There will be several issues that will inform the elections taking place in Indonesia in 2019. The first, and this is an issue that emerges in every election in Indonesian history, is the issue of the role of majority faith within the public domain, including the political system. So traditionally, the big debate has really been between should there be more or less a role for Islam and Muslims within the public domain and public policy. The big demonstrations that took place in Jakarta in 2017 scared a lot of people. It shocked a lot of people, and so in many respects, particularly from the government side, they're looking at a way of diffusing that as a big dividing wedge issue. And the selection by the president of his vice presidential running mate is an attempt at trying to reduce that problem. It will reduce, but it certainly will not eliminate that as a major dynamic in next year's election. I think the second issue, and this is something that exists often at the subterranean level of Indonesian politics, but may get an airing more publicly, is the issue of social inequity, which is in some respects an Indonesian dog whistle for the issue that ethnic and religious minorities have a predominant role in the economy, particularly in the big end of town in terms of the big corporates. And so it's often been seen as a deeply divisive and something that people don't normally touch. But quite clearly, there are people pushing at the fringes, and terminology, particularly pribumi, are being used and oddly reinterpreted in terms of who it is and who it isn't by political figures looking to raise a profile on this issue, is another area that we're going to hear, I believe, quite a bit more going into the future. The issue of how you divide opportunities within the economy for a rising middle class that has higher expectations of opportunity and perhaps a sense that those opportunities aren't being fulfilled. The third issue is on the economy. Firstly, there's a short-term problem. Everybody is looking at the rupiah falling through 15,000 and everybody's in a bit of a panic because they remember the last time that occurred. The country really was in a deep economic crisis. The difference this time is that everybody else is down as well, and the rupiah hasn't fallen further than most other currencies. In fact, the Australian dollar and the rupiah have been basically unchanged for the last 4 or 5 years, and against the Malaysian ringgit, actually the rupiah has still appreciated. And much of this is about the American dollar rising rather than everybody falling. But in the notion of an economy and an election, such subtle differences might not always be easily communicated or defended. A second problem, and I think more important that the country needs to deal with, is its steady withdrawal from global value chains. Over the last 20 years, most countries have actually penetrated more deeply into global value chains. Indonesia, almost alone, has actually withdrawn. Understanding in this almost xenophobic dialogue going forth with regards to economic policy needs to be seen in the light of the fact that most Indonesians don't know what they export. And so it's quite easy to mount a kind of a xenophobic economic argument in sort of being in fear of competition from global partners. We did an attitude study where we asked Australians and Indonesians about things like this. Australians could talk at great length about what the country exported, weren't quite so sure what they imported. Indonesians, on the other hand, could talk forever about what they imported, but really didn't know what they exported. Even the country's its two biggest export items, palm oil and coal, most people had no idea that the country was even exporting these products. So it would seem to me that there's a need for the country to deal with those fundamental, almost issues of economic ideology in order to, I think, withstand what could be a genuine challenge to the country's long-term economic interest within the next few years. Another issue that occurs and is raised in almost every election is this obsession with the Electoral Commission, with things like logistics disbursement and with fear of violence breaking out in elections. Having lived through 7 Indonesian elections, I remain very confident that there is there's no specific reason why violence should be more likely to occur this time. I have also seen these elections, and I have no fear that logistics are going to be a major handicap in what goes on. It's to me a distraction from what should be the effort, which is focusing on the candidates, their parties, their track records and their programs. All of this is just noise in the background that distracts from what really ought to be the focus, which are those candidates. And obviously this election we have a couple of adjustments. Presidency is being elected with the Parliament. That adds to some dynamics, and the Parliament's grown a bit. But I think we should really focus in on the parties, the candidates, their platforms and their accountabilities. That would be a much healthier outcome.